Welcome, friends, to the Gamer Down. This is your host, Dark Hoses. And you may wonder why you're looking at my old alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin. Well, there's one reason you are, because that is where it all began for my mud. And I used to run a mud, and a lot of people have no idea even what the hell a mud is. So hopefully I'm here to educate people a little bit about that. And this really is a completely self-indulgent video, but I just felt compelled to make it for some reason, because so many people have no friggin' clue what a mud is. And way back in 1990, we started in mud. Yes, we did. Actually, it was 1991 was the year. My best friend and I, we began a mud, and I guess I should start at the very beginning. Like, in 1982 or so, my best friend and I used to play a game called Scepter of Goth, which was one of the very first multiplayer games. You could play it over a 300 baud modem, and it cost an ungodly amount of money. I used to pay $100 a month to play that game. Unreal. And I was limited to like 3 hours a day or so. Just, with $100 a month, it was like $8 an hour. It was ridiculous. And yeah, those were some good times and expensive times. But those were the very beginnings of MUDs. It was the very spawning of MUDs. Scepter of Goth was. It was the complete concept that would later follow to become MUDs. After Scepter of Goth, well, we were 13 or 14 by then, and chicks were on our mind, and video games were something completely relegated to the arcade. Arcades were huge in the 80s, and even through the 90s. They're not so much today, because you can play so many games at your house. But way back then, it would be a whole night to go to an arcade and just blow some cash and play video games all night. And my friend and I, we did this all the way up until college, really, We'd go play video games down at this place called The Drag. And, we had we'd stay there till like 2 or 3 in the morning playing video games. And then we discovered the computer labs at the University of Texas. And somehow we managed to finagle a machine. We used the handicap machine, and that was really where it all began. That was the beginning of the adventure. When the whole very first concept of the MUD, it was something that we never thought we would be able to do. It was we played another MUD. We had just discovered MUDs on the internet. This was when the internet was a baby, for almost everybody. There was the only people who had access to the internet were college students and the government and like Apple and IBM. Not everybody could get on the internet. It was a very private organization, you should say, and you had to use Unix. There was no web pages, and times have changed quite a bit. Amazingly, here over 20 years later, the MUD still exists on the internet. It was a labor of love, and so many people who were involved in making this MUD, they could never let it die, and they continue to run this MUD after all these years. It's kind of mind-blowing, knowing where Renegade Outpost has come from. I mean, I made up that name, it's just, I remember sitting here in my room, and thinking, what would be a cool name for a MUD? And Renegade Outpost was born. Sorry, my Texas accent comes out sometimes. And so, yeah, that's where it started. I was playing a MUD myself, and just playing it, and really, I was kind of working towards, thinking, man, how can I run one of my own? How can I have one of my own? And so while playing in MUD, I ran into this guy. He went by the name of Quantum, and his real name was Jorge, I believe. And anyway, me and this guy, we got to know each other, and he gave me a copy of Silly Mud, which was the mud we were playing at the time. It was a pure Silly Mud, which was the best DIKU mud at the time, and it was a guy, an amazing thing. It's like, here I had all of the code for this mud. And so I got on the horn to my best friend, Brett. And me and Brett, we hatched this idea to get this thing going at the University of Texas using multiple accounts. We used, I don't know how many accounts, but we had people's brothers and sisters who went to UT, everybody that we could find. They weren't using the computer lab, so we would have them go down there and get an account at the computer lab. So we'd have enough file space for this gigantic monster, which now is probably like 8 gigs or something. Back then I was like, God, this thing's like 10 gigs long, Now, that's nothing. Renegade Outpost, I believe it was like 30 million lines of code or something like that. It was some outrageous number. And believe it or not, Renegade Outpost was part of the basis for UO, Ultima Online, and another developer went on to develop EQ. So it has quite a rich heritage, this is like where the EQ developers and some of the UO developers cut their teeth. That's pretty amazing. I wish I had some of that EQ money, though. Unfortunately, I'm like one of the only people from this time period in this thing, that now is a multi-millionaire except for me. But I got sick, though, so that kind of put a damper on my plans. So anyway, Quantum and Brett and we three started the process of trying to get this monster under control and trying to get it to run, and it was quite a nightmare. We were having so much trouble getting this mud running on the UT systems, and none of us knew Unix, none of us knew how to code really. We had, we were just very limited, very, very limited, and we got like coding for dummies and things like that, and learning C as we were setting this thing up at the time, But there was one problem, though. Quantum and Brett, they instantaneously hated each other. They did not get along at all. And Brett was like, man, we got to ditch this guy, get rid of this guy, But, I didn't have really any problems with the guy, and I felt really bad, but yeah, it was not too long after that, Quantum tried to log in and found all his account passwords changed, and I felt like he was done wrong, I really do. But what can you do? My friend Brett, he took control really of a lot of the mud and everything like that. Brett did a lot of the work. Brett did so much work for Renegade Outpost that I can't take all the credit for it, but he and I together, we created it because it took both of us. If it weren't for Brett, Renegade Outpost would have never existed, and if it weren't for me, it never would have existed. It took both of us, and without Brett, it never would have got off the ground. I had a serious interest in doing it, but the technical know-how, I did not know how. And Brett had the technical know-how. I was the creative force behind Renegade Outpost. I keep saying Renegade Outpost. I was the creative force behind it. I was the one who wrote most of the areas and redesigned the entire city, basically. It used to be called Midgard back then, and it was pretty good. What Silly Mud had, except I wanted to convert this game into Scepter of Goth. I wanted to make Renegade Outpost Scepter of Goth, and I wanted to relive my childhood experiences, and I wanted to also expose people to something so awesome as Scepter of Goth. So a lot of the places in Renegade Outpost are direct copies of Scepter of Goth from my mind. I mean, I bet if you compared both of the games together now, there would be no comparison, because I wrote it all from memory, from my 13-year-old memory, and entire areas I recreated, but I also wrote a few new areas too, and I polished up all of the DIKU mode. And while Brett, he was the coding force behind Renegade Outpost, he dissected several other MUDs, and we took a lot from several other MUDs. And then one day, we were very, very fortunate to get a very highly skilled coder in. And that guy, he's the one that went on to develop EQ. He was amazing. He basically coded like 10 or 15 classes just out of nowhere, I mean, the dude was great. He put so much work into Renegade Outpost with the classes and things like that. If you look at EQ, you'll see, I'm sure, some of their some reflections in there. Back in those days, I went by the name of Derrican, and you can see my name maybe in some of these credits here. But yeah, I was Derrican back then. That was my handle at the time. And you will notice how long this list is. This is the list of areas. And over the years, many, many people have contributed to Renegade Outpost and wrote their own areas, added into the game. But I mean, there's also quite a few areas that I did write and I'm not credited for. Like the zoo, the Midgard Zoo. I wrote that, man. Me and Brett wrote that, actually. And the carnival, yeah, I think I got credit on that. But anyway, we took all, so many people. I mean, it's hard to believe, but by the end of Renegade Outpost's peak, we had 30,000 accounts. And 200 people could be online at the same time. It was insane. It was crazy. And being the creator of this game, Brett and I were like these rock star gods. That's what they called the creators back then of these games. They called everybody a god, and people could get up to top level, and they could also become a god themselves. And it was pretty neat, because people always had that goal to become a god and eventually maybe make their own area. So there was, a lot of give and take. I mean, it's the birthplace of modern MMORPGs, and it would be so awesome if in like WoW or Rift or one of those games you could write your own area that people could explore. Wouldn't that be amazing? But unfortunately, I don't think the technology's probably there yet. And even if the technology is there, I don't think any MMO developer would have the gumption to do something like that, to allow players such freedom, because it could, be exploited, of course, It was very tight-knit back then. I mean, I remember one time when Renegade Outpost went down, and Brett and I and all the other gods, we couldn't figure out how to get the thing going again. And we had people from the Pentagon, and we had people from Apple computers, people from IBM. We had IBM and Apple technicians working together trying to get Renegade Outpost going again. People were so addicted to this game. This game was like people's lives. We once had a party, and we invited anybody who wanted to come, who from the game. Yeah, big mistake, right? And so a lot of people did show up, and it turned out to be a really cool experience and a really awesome experience. And Brett and I, we're so lame. We told everybody they could stay at our girlfriends' houses at the time, and they did. We piled up like 10 people at our girlfriend's house, and it was pretty nuts. And at the time, when these people came down to Austin and met me and met Brett, I remember like one guy, his hands were visibly shaking, to shake my hand. And I'm just like, dude, calm down, man, And he was like 30-something years old, and I was like 19 at the time. And it was kind of crazy, kind of crazy experience. And the people I got to meet at that time was awesome. I got to talk to people from all walks of life and all kinds of high level positions, and they were so addicted to my game and Brett's game. We never abused our power, of course. We were always really cool and laid back people, but when people would get around Brett and I, it was like, oh man, we're around, somebody who could just take all of this away from us. And so everybody was like super nice to us, Yeah. There was always tons of drama on the mud, and it was always something with the game, There's always some sort of falling out or a god losing their mind and cheating and things like that. But like Brett and I, we created like secret gear for ourselves. We had the Sword of Killing, which could kill anything with one hit, and we had could set our stats like where we couldn't die. And so we had these couple of badass characters who would like show up in the game every once in a while and just take a bunch of newbies maybe into the darkest, deepest areas of the game. It was a lot of fun. That was one other thing that isn't done now. Direct GM experience. That was so amazing because you could have like a GM show up and go on a complete adventure with you, and that is impossible now. It's just completely impossible now. It would be show too much favoritism, and there's not enough GMs in the world. But back then, when the players were the GMs, it opened up many possibilities, and that's what makes MUDs such a unique enigma, and why none of these modern MMOs will ever capture what they had. Part of MMOs were imagination, and almost 90% of MUDs were imagination. Modern MMOs don't require that much imagination anymore. It's all right before you. The graphics, the voice acting, whatever. In MUDs, it was all in your mind. You could make the most gorgeous graphics in your mind. You have the highest definition in your brain, compared to real graphics, of course. And I mean, when you played a MUD, you could see the dragons and you could see all of these things in your mind. At least I could when I would play a MUD. And it was an amazing experience that so many people will never get to enjoy and never experience at all. So many people are like, God, I miss the imagination and the adventure and the magic of my first MMO. And I know what you mean, I know what you mean, but if you could have only played a MUD, then you would really know what it is to really live an adventure. It's like a living book. That was the way I used to always describe a MUD. It's a living book, and you could walk through this book, and you can be a part of this book. That was so cool, and it's something that won't ever exist again, unless there was some MUD revival, but I sincerely doubt there will be. But you can play Renegade Outpost anytime you want. Just Google up Renegade Outpost, and you can easily find it. And how you log in is you need to Google up a telnet program. And the best one is PuttyTel is the one I use. PuttyTel. That's all you need to know. So you get PuttyTel, and then you just put in the address for like Renegade Outpost, and you can play it, for free, of course. And, there are not too many people play anymore. It's a 20-something-year-old game. But if you are interested in the history of MMOs and where they come from and, what the developers played when they were growing up, then maybe you might want to check it out. Talking to Brett not too long ago, amazingly we still talk. And he was telling me about when he ran into one of the UO developers and that they had to strip out our names from the code because Brett did most of the coding, so he put Brett and everything. He put his name all over the place, and these coders over at UO, over at Orion, they had to strip out Brett's name, over and over again. And he said it was just ingrained in his mind. I always thought that was kind of hilarious, And I do have to mention that I have no affiliation with Renegade Outpost anymore. It's changed hands so many times over the years. It's been given to the people who played it, and it's been handed down, and I'm very happy that it still exists, that somebody still has taken the time to preserve this piece of history. I mean, this is a piece of history, guys. If you're a gamer and if you care about gaming, and maybe if you just want to know about like the history of games, man, I mean, this is where it all began. Renegade Outpost and these MUDs. There was many MUDs, of course. I mean, Renegade Outpost wasn't the only MUD. There wasn't a lot of MUDs, though. There was only a handful, and there was only very few good ones. And Renegade Outpost, it was definitely top rated. I imagine that anybody who played a MUD back then, they probably remember the name at least. So, how about enough talk, and how about I show you exactly what a MUD is? It was very difficult to get this footage. I probably would have had a lot more footage through this video, except it was such a pain in the ass to get footage using Telnet, and Fraps doesn't record it, so I had to use another third-party technique to capture the video for it. Now, a lot of people are going to say, that is the most primitive shit I've ever seen in my life. And you see that castle in the name. I remember I created that like in 1992 or something like that. Isn't that just crazy? I remember making that. And this is where you log in at. And you just, write pretty much any name you want. Except there seems to be quite a limitation on the names. So I don't know what's up with that. I guess they got more into role-playing, and it got out from under my guidance a long time ago, and Brett and I, when we ran this thing, it was very popular, and it was popular for a reason, because we like to have some fun, and we had a lot of fun. And you see how many choices there are. You can multi-class your race, and there's just so many different choices. I mean, there's a lot of character development, and as you play the game, you get tons and tons of loot, and as you progress through the game, and you gain levels and you gain experience, and we added so many cool features to this MUD, and back then it was customary to eat and drink in a game. Like, to survive, you had to eat and drink just to live. So you would start to feel hungry, and anyway, you have to go get your food. But this is it. This is what a MUD is. It looks so primitive, of course. It's all words. It's all text. But if you read it and you start to play the game, it becomes a part of your imagination. It really does. It is something that can't be described. It's something that has to be played and experienced. So if you've never played a MUD, then I highly, highly recommend you go check one out. Just to see. Just to know what a MUD is. And if you're maybe an old-time MUD player, then hell, might as well go back to memory lane and go check a MUD out. Go check out Renegade Outpost. I know there's still quite a few MUDs out these days. I'm surprised how many MUDs still exist. It is quite mind-blowing. I even went on a MUD I used to play and talked to people from that I used to know back in the 90s. That everybody's an old man now. And it's hard to believe. But you see how primitive it was. Everything is text, like I said. And to look at something, you type look at ball, or look at man, or look at merchant, or whatever. And I think it even froze up halfway, the video did. That figures. The resource I used to capture this was a third-party piece of crap, so you have to forgive me for that. But the way it worked was you could walk through the city going north, south, east, and west, and you see an enemy, you type kill and the enemy's name, and you could also cast spells if you were a magic user. It's a lot to explain, really. Even in a 30-minute video, it's a lot to explain. It's something you just have to really go and see for yourself and check it out. It's probably, not for everybody, of course, but for some people, it might be something completely different that they never thought about going to go play, or never thought about playing, or never even maybe knew existed, And there's so many stories from back in those days that I could spend hours and hours telling you about the crazy experiences, the mud weddings, and how Brett and I had set up spy chats, and how we could spy on everybody in the game, and it was pretty funny. Me and Brett, we were pretty damn sneaky, Brett and I guess. We even spied on a mud wedding's honeymoon. I even have that saved to disk, but unfortunately I have no device to read any of those old ancient discs. I will have to drag my old Atari out of the closet. But maybe I'll have another episode of this. This was just a trip down memory lane, and like I said, a very, very self-indulgent video. I made this kind of for myself, and maybe somebody out there would enjoy it as well. So thanks again for being with me. This has been Darkosis, also known as Durkin, back in the day. Take care.